Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam. Good morning. Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Today is Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. Disclaimer, in mostly majority in appreciation to the Massachusetts General Hospital Office of Equity and Community Health. I was able to get a new laptop to kind of not be shut down and things and overwhelm the system. And I switched it last night. And so disclaimer now, if anything happens on the tech end, not my fault. But we definitely appreciate the partnership that we have with Massachusetts General Hospital. I will pause here and say this. Some of you that are regular viewers of Java with Jimmy, we are acknowledging the anniversary of a passing of a very prominent spiritual leader here in the city of Boston. And while we're not going to address that in this segment today, I am contemplating coming back this afternoon or this evening. And so for those of you that may be looking for that acknowledgement here in the Java Cafe today that didn't remember that it's your Healthy Java today, I just wanted to name that. And without further ado, I would like to bring this wonderful outreach educator, someone who has a passion to ensure that we get health education in our community, specifically in Black and Brown communities. I would like to introduce and present again our medical director, Dr. Claude Alabre. Welcome this morning. Welcome, sir. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you for the lovely intro, Jimmy. I appreciate it.
I mean it. It's good that you are doing well. And we just want to acknowledge, as we talk about health and mental health in this space, there's a lot going on in the world, and we just want to name that and hold. I believe since we when we were last here, March 1st, I believe things that were going on in the Ukraine were active. And so we just want to name that as we talk about health and mental health. And I'm trying to get away from saying mental health because it's all part of one thing. But anyway, we just wanted to name that. And Dr. Alabre, why are we talking about health and nutrition today? We've had the last couple of segments talking about heart health with Dr. Gusa, and also who was last with us on the last? Yes. And so we've been moving in the theme of routine and preventative healthcare, and in this pandemic and everything that's going on. Why are we talking about health and nutrition today? How important?
Yeah. I mean, it's a very important part of health, which sometimes we tend to neglect because it's not, handed out in a pill. And we talk a lot about how a lot of the stuff we can do actually comes from just the basics, like eating well and exercising, staying active, good sleep, stress reduction. That's been a recurrent theme here on the show. And, the last two shows, as you mentioned, we talked about heart health. And the importance of exercise when it comes to heart health and prevention. And both of the cardiologists we had on mentioned how about 80% of heart attacks are preventable. I mean, it's a huge amount. And that actually all comes from the 7 simple life things we talked about: quitting smoking, exercising well, lowering your cholesterol, and which comes all sort of part of the nutrition. So we wanted to really tie it all together and talk about what can we actually do to do these parts of our sort of healthy heart and healthy life.
Absolutely. And Dr. Alabre, I just wanted to mention that affectionately, you've gained a new name here in the Java Cafe. Morning, Dr. Labre. But we want to bring our
I like
guest.
it.
If we're going to bring our guest in, it's not her first time here. And I promoted her. I called her Dr. Bader, and she nicely let me know this morning that we can just call her Abir. But she is no stranger to the Java Cafe. She was with us before talking about nutrition and healthy eating when Dr. Fatima was with us as well around the holidays. And so Abir, I will try to get used to saying that without Dr. Bader. But Abir, welcome.
I know she loves what she does. She wants to be where she is. I'm sure this is her favorite, and she's great at it. So we will call her what she wants.
I did say
Right, Abir.
I did say in the pre-show, as this is Women's History Month, we did want to acknowledge, and our exercise and physiologists are going to come in as well, but we definitely want to acknowledge that RD behind her name as well. It may not be MD, but we want to acknowledge these wonderful women that are coming, that are contributors there at Massachusetts General Hospital and making great strides as women in medicine in all three of their fields. But we'll see our other guests in a couple of seconds. They're waiting patiently in the background. But Abir, welcome back to the Java Cafe. How are you this morning?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about healthy eating and healthy eating in general with you guys today. And I'm doing great.
That is great to hear. And it's going to be a great conversation. And so one thing that I did learn, and I said, there's a new, and Dr. Labre, you've mentioned this before, I refer to the new food plate. It's not really that new. How many years old is it?
As long as I can remember, I could say that. It's been maybe about 12 years, 10 years, I think, or so.
So you let me get away
with new developments, right? So
you let me get away with 3 or 4 years in the pre-show. But how important, Dr. Abir, well, let's back up a little bit. For those that don't know or didn't see you before, just tell us a little bit about who you are. And Dr. Alabre mentioned that you want to be in this place as this registered dietitian. And so why are you so passionate about nutrition and being a dietitian? Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're so passionate about this.
That's a great question. So my name is Abir, as you know. I actually grew up in the Middle East and made my way to Canada for schooling and my undergrad and master's degree. And I've always had an interest in food, and specifically really, so many different cultures out there, so many different foods, right? And we know that each food affects you differently. Treat food as thy medicine, they say, right? And so I've always had an interest to, how does a food affect our health? How does food affect our mood? How does food affect our energy? And so I wanted to delve deep into that and learn a little bit more about it and learn how we can prevent disease and manage disease, with food. So that's really up my alley and my, interest and passion in terms of why I ended up in nutrition.
I'm looking forward to this. Go ahead, Dr. Labre.
Oh, I was saying awesome. I like hearing this.
I want to ask a question, and this is personal to me, and I'm going to be very transparent. How important is breakfast in the morning?
That's a really good question. I would say, I usually take a step back and say, do you like eating breakfast? Do you wake up eating hungry, right? And what we've learned in nutrition is there isn't this one size fits all. And that's why it's really individualized and unique, right? For some people, breakfast is really important, right? And in order to manage their hunger later in the day, in order to manage their disease state, in order to provide them energy for them to function appropriately at work or at school. For others, it might not be an appropriate option, or there might be a better option. Perhaps they want to follow something like intermittent fasting, and do a different eating model or eating pattern. So really working with the client and seeing what is best for you and your needs and, your desires.
It's interesting to hear flexibility there, because I thought I was going to get in trouble because growing up, breakfast is the first meal of the day and you have to have breakfast. I heard how you gave a nod to those that do intermittent fasting. And so I like the individualized piece. Dr. Labre, if I could ask you to just correlate, and we're going to go into the 12-year-old new food plate or pyramid thing. Can we correlate? And Abir already started kind of talking about it, but there is correlation between what, how, and when you eat and your health, correct?
Yes, there is. And I actually wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Abir was saying, or at least give a little bit of I guess, boost to the nutrition world, because one of the things I hear often from my patients when we talk about maybe seeing a nutritionist is they have this fear of this one size fits all, as you were mentioning, that they don't want to see a nutritionist, especially someone who may not be from their culture or doesn't know their background, because they think they're just going to prescribe them one thing that they have to do. And they kind of feel like they need to stay with what they know, what they've done. And we talk a lot about, no, it's about tweaking and helping you using sort of what you've been doing and seeing maybe there's some modifications that can be done. It's not about prescribing you their ideas. And so I really wanted to make sure that people hear that if you want to see a nutritionist, if you're being asked to talk to a dietitian, be open, because they are very open. There is flexibility. So it's actually not as sometimes people feel.
This is awesome, because the goal of this collaboration and sponsorship with MGH and Your Healthy Java is so folks can learn. And I'll be very honest with you. I am surprised to hear the individuality and customization from this, because Dr. Alabre, as much as I'm in this space, I am still in that school of thought. If I go that I'm going to be prescribed sort of the regular. And so maybe this is a good time to jump in when you refer to a regular. What is sort of the standard recommended a beer sort of pyramid or new plate or plan? I know that meat should be like the size of your fist. You should have more vegetables. But again, can you tell us you're the expert. Can you tell us the real deal?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There are fundamental pieces that are really critical and key in health, adhering to a healthy regimen, right? And I would say, in order to manage disease, prevent disease, manage your weight, we all definitely recommend and endorse a diet that's really high in vegetables, right? So that's like fundamental. You really want to think about adding what I call these volume-rich foods that add a lot of volume to your plate, but they don't really impact your weight much and have quite a bit of nutritious benefit. So a lot of these vegetables have quite a bit of fiber. We know the role of fiber. Fiber helps you feel full. Fiber helps delay the absorption of sugar or glucose. Fiber helps with, regularity and bowel movements. It also helps prevent heart disease, right? And so, when you think about that plate that you're referring to, try to load up on vegetables. So we envision, a 9-inch plate or smaller, and ideally filling up with half plate vegetables. So let's think about what we want to add, right? So we definitely want to have more vegetables on your plate. If you can add different colors, that's great. A lot more variety, if possible. Different vegetables, different colored vegetables provide you different nutrients. And then after that, as you mentioned, quarter of the plate protein. So what is a protein, right? Ideally a leaner protein if possible, things like chicken or poultry without the skin. Why are we removing the skin? Because the skin has quite a bit of saturated fat. And we want to try to limit that as much as possible in order to, hopefully better manage our heart disease and our health. So a lean protein, poultry without the skin, maybe a leaner cut of meat. Maybe you want to go plant-based every once in a while and choose legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas, excellent source of fiber and protein that are lower in fat. Cold water fatty fish, super great. Salmon, mackerel, sardines. These are an excellent source of omega-3s, which help reduce triglycerides, which is a blood fat. So trying to choose, leaner cuts of protein for that other quarter. And then the remaining quarter is a grain or a starch, a medium-sized baked potato, quinoa, try something new like maybe brown rice. And if you want to have white rice every once in a while, that's totally fine. But if you're looking for that extra extra fiber, extra nutrition, you ideally want to opt for the grains if possible.
Got you and understood there. And as you named earlier, so that's sort of the general fundamental foundation of what Dr. Alabre has been referring to in healthy eating. Now, let's filter that through, which a large part of our audience is of color. And we, from our cultures, we have the vegetables, we have them. But sometimes, you mentioned saturated fat. And so if I could ask a question, and Dr. Alabre, jump in here as well. And so can you define why? Because we've heard, I'll say, well, we've all heard this growing up. Saturated fat is not good. Now, I know what the word saturate means. It means a lot, or to cover, or to fully engulf, or whatever. And so why is there such a concern about saturated fats?
Yeah. I actually take a step back. So for me, the biggest concern is something called trans fat. Okay. So trans fat is that man-made fat where they basically add a hydrogen molecule to the food to increase the shelf life of the food. And you often find it in packaged foods. Cookies, cakes, chips. We used to find it in margarines in the past. Sometimes you find it in nut butters. This is that man-made fat. And why we really want to try our best to avoid trans fat or hydrogenated fat, so if you see that in the ingredient list, is because the literature suggests that it increases what we call our bad cholesterol, known as LDL, low density lipoprotein, and it increases our bad cholesterol and it decreases our good cholesterol. I refer to it as our happy cholesterol, which is our high density lipoprotein. So it does the exact opposite of what we want, right? And so we really ultimately want to try our best to limit the processed food, which is high in trans fat. Okay, so that's that man-made fat. Now, when it comes to saturated fat, saturated fat you can think of as coming from anything from a beating heart. So you think about, things like chicken, meat, especially, skin on the chicken, the fatty portion of the meat, butter, cheese, lard, full fat milk, etc., heavy cream. This is what we call, it has quite a bit of saturated fat. And so saturated fat, it's not as harmful as trans fat, but we don't want it to be the primary source of fat because there is some literature suggesting it possibly could increase your LDL cholesterol. So what we want to try to focus more on, if possible, is that what we call the unsaturated fat. This is primarily the plant-based fats. They're coming from things like extra virgin olive oil, nuts and seeds, avocados. These have heart protective properties where they do what we want. They help decrease that bad cholesterol known as LDL and increase that good cholesterol known as HDL, right? And so we're not saying avoid saturated fat completely, but let's try to watch the portions. If there's a healthier substitute, can we have that more often? And in order to, manage our heart health.
With that being said, Abir, thank you so much for the balance between I was going to say it's not triglycerides, it's trans fat, and then saturated fat. Again, learning in real time. And so, Dr. Alabri, let's sort of compare and contrast what is good for us, and then what through either all the positive parts of our culture in those some ways we got, the spoils of things. We do eat vegetables in all cultures, but in Black and brown cultures, sometimes the vegetables or the starches are covered. In one of the other segments, we were talking in the holidays, and in our culture, if it's not, what did she say? Fried, smothered, buttered, and something else. And so, not a judgment call, but we have to, ask the question, Dr. Alabri, is there any correlation for various reasons between higher numbers of Black and brown people with issues in heart disease and diabetes and things like that? Is there a correlation with our food culture, if you will?
I think there is. It's not the only thing. It's a complex sort of system, because we do know genetics play a big role in terms of how you process food. We do know there are people out there who will eat lots of saturated fat and trans fat, and actually somehow their cholesterol profile, which is when we talk about the LDL, the HDL, triglycerides, it's perfect. So it's not a straightforward situation, but at the same time, it plays a big role. And we don't always know people's genetic profile to know who can actually tolerate it. So we go with a blanket kind of statement and say everyone should try this. And there's really no harm, even if you don't need that sort of what Abir was just prescribing there, or describing, I should say, to do that. And so out of precaution, also because of lack of ability to say, you can do this, you can do that, you can have this much fat. We're not at that level yet to be this granular. So we have sort of patterns in overall sort of general recommendations. And again, to tie it back to the medical part, we do know LDL, lipids, cholesterol play a big role in strokes and heart attack. And so especially for people who have been told they either have a family history of heart disease or have personally had heart disease, we really want these people to be very conscious about how they eat and what they eat. And then for everyone, sort of try to follow that healthy sort of plate or pyramid, however you want to call it, so that we prevent them from getting to these places as well. Okay.
Yes.
And then the other thing, I really like what Abir was saying there about um, sort of giving options, because one of the things I think people sometimes ask is that, well, this is what I've done all my life. Now you're telling me to do something different. I don't even know what that is. And so I wanted to ask Abir, I know you've mentioned it's hard to really go into every little details about every foods out there, but are there resources out there, Abir, that people could go to and see, okay, what alternatives are there? If I'm used to, say, doing fried chicken with skin, and if I'm trying to maybe cut back on, instead of doing it every day, I'll do it 2 days a week, but those other days of the week, what can I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I would encourage consulting with a dietitian for really that individualized kind of question, right? But there's so many resources out there that are reputable. You know, the eatright.org website is a reputable one.
Can you
There's
repeat that so I can put that in the comments?
eatright.org. There's also the American Heart Association that's quite reputable and has a wealth of resources, right? There's the American Diabetes Association, of course. I would go to these reputable sites to determine sort of what's a healthier option out there, right? Instead of maybe fried chicken, what could I possibly have for a heart protective protein choice? And then, of course, if you're looking for healthier recipes, you know, there's a bunch of also recipes that you can go to and indicate what is my goal. My goal is weight loss. My goal is heart healthy eating. You can indicate, like, you know, by a check mark, what is your goal, and then it'll populate for you a bunch of recipes that you can follow, right? So, you know, Cooking Delight is a a popular one. Some clients like soscuisine.com, not promoting here, but these are resources that are helpful for a lot of people.
Well, I wanted to ask a question of Beer around the point of getting on. I used to be 260. My doctor said 280 pounds. And let's just also name that people can be heavier and still be healthy. Dr. Alabre, I like what you mentioned around the fact that, and I want to ask another question later on about this, there are sort of the standards, and we don't know a person's tolerance. And I guess maybe I'll ask it now a little bit of Beer, if you don't mind. Most of the time, do you find out that a person's tolerance around metabolism and how they process the food is usually on the negative or back end when we find out that their system doesn't tolerate it that well? As you said, there's no way of really telling, and is the only time of telling when it demonstrates itself in a bad health diagnosis, Dr. Labre?
Not exactly. And that's part of the importance of seeing your doctor regularly that we talk about. We do have ways to actually test cholesterol and actually see what your profile is. We can tell what your ratio of bad and good cholesterol is and how hard you need to work on and what you can do. It's not always feasible either by just diet and exercise. That's always the first step, and it's always a good thing to do. But there are times that you actually will need additional support, like medications and whatnot. But we do have, where I was saying, we can't really tell you what exactly your genetics are and how much you can sort of predict tolerate and not tolerate, but we get a pretty good sense by some of the testing that we do, checking for diabetes, checking for cholesterol and things like that. Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that clarity. And sorry to go off a little bit, but that kind of crossed my mind when you were talking. Abir, can I ask you, what I was starting to ask is that, would you recommend that people make life changes? For me, I decided when I wanted to lose weight and be healthier, I decided, and I just saw something, I just need to plug in the laptop, Dr. I told y'all technical. Dr. Labre, I'll ask the question, and Dr. Beer, you can answer. Should you diet, or should you try to adopt lifelong changes? And I'm going to put you two on screen for Dr. B. I'm going to put you on screen for 1 second while I go plug this up before we get shut down.
Take your time, no worries. I think you bring a really, really great question up, right? And I have to agree with the latter. This isn't, you know, we think of diet as being short term, something I'm going to follow for a period of time. Once I get my labs in check, my numbers are in check, or my weight in check, I'm no longer going to follow this diet. We don't want to think with that approach. We really want to think about healthy eating as a lifestyle change, something that you're going to continue doing, you know, for the rest of your life. And that's why it's really, really important that you follow something that you can commit to and be consistent with, and that's going to work with your lifestyle, right? And that's where you had mentioned earlier, it's really important to think about your cultural rich, your cultural foods. What foods do you typically enjoy? What kind of foods do you have access to? Which foods are going to nourish my body with the nutrients it needs for it to function appropriately? So you really want to think about lifestyle change, things that you can actually incorporate. Oftentimes we also think about doing, all the changes at once, and sometimes that can be difficult and can end up in a vicious cycle of maybe abandoning those goals. And so start small, start slow, make a modification here and there. Maybe if you're adding butter onto your vegetables, try a little bit of olive oil and see how that goes. Maybe it's a healthier, change. So I would say take it slow and really want to think about this as a lifestyle change and something that you can try your best to commit to long term.
To your point earlier about extra virgin olive oil, who we call Auntie Java here, saying extra olive oil on salads, cook only with olive oil. And so that's what she's doing there. One of the things that we talked about is exercise, and we're getting ready to bring our other guests, Alyssa and Shayna, in the room. But Abir, before we let you go, I wanted to make sure if you have any questions for Abir specifically around diet, and I think I see one here. This is one of our Java family members. Seriously, is it too much salt, sugar the night before? And so I don't know in reference, but I saw salt and sugar and just wanted to point that out, because those are two things that, and again, I'll put myself on the line. Not so much as bad with salt. I don't cook with salt that much anymore. But salt and sugar, and then we're going to get ready to bring in our other guests, Alyssa and Shayna, our exercise physiologists.
Yeah, great question. And I'll go back to Dr. Alabre's point, right? There are some people that might need to watch how much salt or sodium they're consuming, and others might not need to be as, proactive and as, choosy or picky with the quantity that they're consuming, right? But the blanket statement is try your best to add herbs and spices and vinegars to your food and really taste the flavor of food and be minimal with the amount of salt, used in your cooking. But it's not a blanket statement. I would defer back to your physician, dietitian, depending on your medical disease state, as to what that quantity should look like. Same goes for sugar. I think sugar is a little bit different in a sense where really there's no nutritional value to sugar. There's definitely no harm in minimizing added sugar, but you want to think about, where's my sugar coming from? Are we talking about sugar coming from a fruit where there's a lot of nutrition and a lot of fiber? Or are we talking about sugar coming from a candy cane, right? So I think that difference is definitely huge. And we want to try our best to limit the processed sugar, that sugar that I was referring to, that packaged sugar, where it's stripped of all the nutrition.
And then that's the sugar that kind of often goes in here. We're going to get ready to bring in our other guests, Alyssa and Shayna, so you all can sort of cross over. And just for a couple of seconds, there is a correlation between diet and exercise, correct? Yeah, I see the head shaking. What is the correlation? And then we'll turn it over to our physiologist.
So essentially, your nutrition is going to give you energy to exercise. So, nutrition timing and what food you're putting into your body fuels you for your exercise session.
All right. We're going to let Dr. Abir go, because I want to delve a little bit into the customization, because I know some people that exercise, they eat a lot of protein, a few hours. So we'll go into that. But and I keep saying Dr. Abir, thank you so much for coming in again. And I'm sure we'll have you back. There are a couple of questions that were raised when you were talking. And so and we definitely thank you for your time being with us.
You're more than welcome. Happy to answer them offline too, if you'd like to. Take care. It's so great seeing you guys.
And Abir, if you just quickly, if you staying in the background, maybe there'll be questions at the end. If we can bring you back.
Absolutely, love to.
We can definitely do that. All right, Alyssa and Shayna and Dr. Abir, I will take you out here. Here we go. All right, I forgot how to do that. There we go. Okay, so again, technical stuff today. But Alyssa and Shayna, welcome to the Java Cafe for Your Healthy Java. Dr. Alabre spoke highly of both of you about your experience in being exercise physiologists. And so tell us a little bit about both of yourselves. We'll start with, and you see them on screen, but they're in reverse. So we'll start alphabetically with Alyssa. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you went into exercise physiology.
Yeah, so my name's Alyssa. Currently, Shayna and I both work in the cardiopulmonary exercise lab here at Mass General. So essentially, we see outpatients who come in And we run them through an exercise study, give their doctors a lot of information how to tailor their exercise, or give them diagnosis of why they're feeling short of breath or why they're feeling some symptoms. I also come from a background of cardiac and pulmonary rehab. So essentially helping patients after a pulmonary diagnosis or a cardiac event and teaching them how to exercise safely, and also pulling in some like nutrition, education, diabetes management education. And I think I went into exercise because I've always been active. I grew up playing sports, and I just think it's a vital part of being a human, and it's essential to all of our overall wellness and mental health.
Thank you for that correlation, because we're going to talk a little bit about that later. And so, Shayna, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you went into this particular specialty around exercise physiology.
Absolutely. So I'm Shayna. I grew up in Massachusetts my whole life, still here in the Boston area, which is wonderful. I also was an active child, but I was always interested in kind of how the body works, and all those processes of what is going on within ourselves. So I was always interested in that. So that's kind of why I went with the exercise and the physiology route about our bodies and how they work. And I think it's just such an important role in our overall health. Exercise is something that we kind of get away from, or we think we don't have enough time for. So I always kind of enjoyed that. So that's kind of why I went into exercise. And I also have a background in pulmonary rehab, and I work here at MGH with Alyssa here doing exercise studies.
I'm excited to have both of you here. And so Dr. Alabre and Alyssa and Shayna, we're going to jump into this a little bit deeper. Dr. Alabre, we've talked often about the correlation between diet and our health. And there is correlation between being healthy and intentionally exercising. I think it was Dr. Ferrarier, forgive me for pronouncing her name wrong. Yes, that mentioned there's a difference between, just kind of regularly going up the stairs and walking to the store or whatever versus intentionality. And so, Dr. Alabre, why is it important to have these folks come and talk about intentional exercise versus just sort of the regular thing we do, like?
Right. So, I mean, when it comes especially to heart health, it's not the only thing. We do know exercise is really important for almost everything, for life in general, for a well-functioning body. We now understand a lot about the importance of exercise for mental health, to reduce stress, help with depression, anxiety, make you happy, but also reducing your risk of heart attack, stroke, and how your cholesterol get metabolized. We just talked about cholesterol. There's a difference in the different types of cholesterol you have in your body. And exercise actually plays a role in how your good cholesterol can actually rise with good exercise, and bad cholesterol can go down, which is exactly what you want. So there's a lot of correlation, and it's very important. But also in terms of exercise, we talked about how sometimes you think you do exercise, but not quite getting to the level that we
Wait, hold on. Can we
Yeah.
stop for 1 minute? Dr. Alabre's voice goes up a little bit when he's trying to. It's going to cut us nicely.
I'm being nice. I mean, we do know, in all seriousness, though, there is an importance for any level of activity. It's not useless. So going for a little walk is always important. It's more than better than just sitting on the couch all the time. But when we're talking about someone who really needs to modify certain things in their bodies, like if you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to reduce your cholesterol, doing certain things, you do need to bring it to a little bit of a higher level. And that's why we talk about cardiovascular exercise versus non-cardiovascular. There is sort of like aerobic and anaerobic. So these are how we characterize the type of exercise you do and how these can impact the different aspect of your life. And I think both Shayna and Alyssa will hopefully elaborate on. And I think they had the perfect, I have to say, I'm going to jump in here and say, both of you kind of set the stage really nicely, at least from my standpoint, because the biggest things I hear, the sort of two main concerns people have are what you both each actually brought up, is how to start, and when do I have time for this? And I think Alyssa sort of started by talking about how she's worked with people after a heart attack and how to get them to sort of ramp up. And I think that fits well with people who have not maybe exercised much in life. Where do they start and how do they start? And then Shayna hopefully can talk a little bit about how do we sort of fit this into our busy lives a little bit, because that's really big concerns for a lot of people.
And also, as I mentioned to Shayna and Alyssa in the sort of pre-conversation, is in a pandemic and with understanding that a lot of our audience may be in different lanes on the road to becoming healthy. Is that a good way to frame it? And so I forgot how the order you went in, Dr. Labrie, but getting started.
I think Alyssa and then Shayna.
Alyssa, yeah. Okay, Alyssa. So where does one get started? How do they get started in a manner, I guess, as I said to Abir, that it's not just this, you know, sort of 3-month, 2-week thing, and then I'm done. Mm-hmm. Like life-changing. What are a couple of the first steps?
Yeah, so I think the first step is essentially just starting, just taking, you know, small bouts of exercise to start out. You don't need to start doing, you know, an hour-long jog one day. You know, it's starting out small and building your muscles and your respiratory system and your heart muscle. Your heart is a muscle, so doing the cardiovascular exercise and bringing your heart rate up to a certain point and sustaining that for essentially 30 minutes for a bout of exercise is going to give you that cardiovascular benefit. Another thing to think about is if you're a little intimidated by, you know, 30 minutes, do you think I can even go out and do 30 minutes? You start out with 5 or 10 minutes on your first day. I think people maybe are intimidated starting out an exercise program thinking they need to go, you know, all in the first day. You're probably going to lose a little motivation when you're sore the next day. So I think just starting out with smaller bouts of exercise to begin with is going to give you a great benefit. And then you'll be able to build up to that longer exercise and hopefully getting that heart health benefit.
Thank you for that. And
then Alyssa, I don't know. Sorry, I don't know if you're familiar with the. There's an app I know out there called Couch to 5K.
Listen, they didn't write us a check, Dr. Labrie. We don't want.
I know. I'm not going to, but I get it. That's why I try to be as diverse in my resources because people do sort of need some support, like where to start and how to go. I was just basically saying, are you familiar with that? Would you recommend it, or do you have other resources that you would say that can actually maybe sort of help people with that step by step, as opposed to just feeling kind of left to themselves to figure out what to do?
Yeah, so I have heard of that. I've never used the app, but I've used like Runkeeper, and you can put goals into your Runkeeper app. So it'll kind of track your progress, give you updates on like how your exercise session went. You can set it for like a month-long goal of like how many minutes you want to walk per day or run per day or bike per day. So there's definitely a lot of apps out there that you can use to kind of track that. An app that I personally use is MyFitnessPal. So that's kind of, you can log your exercise and your nutrition. So kind of tie in both of kind of what we're talking about today. Keep track of that. So that's been a helpful tool for myself, keeping myself motivated and kind of tracking my exercise.
Thank you for that. And
there are things out there. So talk to a friend, talk to your doctor, find out what works for you. The idea is not that I'm saying to use this.
I had to. Shayna, your perspective on getting started and intentionality around exercising. And I see that there are questions in the comments, and we're going to take those in just a few moments. One that I thought was not a serious question, but I do see that, and we're going to pose that, bring Abir back in a couple of seconds as well. So Shayna, what's your perspective?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of times I hear from a lot of patients or people I work with that, you know, the time to do it, we're all busy, right? We all have busy lives. We have jobs, we have kids, we have all kinds of things going on in our lives. And kind of bringing it back to what Alyssa said, you don't necessarily have to go to a gym for an hour, right? You don't have to like take your time, get on the bus, go to the gym, get back on the bus, get home. That takes a long time. You just have to take small amounts of time. And I always would ask the people I work with, you know, how much TV do you watch when you get home at night? You know, 2 episodes of something. Now there's your half hour or your hour, just to kind of give you a time frame, and we are tired, right? When we get home from work, I totally get it. But it's just saying, okay, tonight I'm going to bring my clothes with me, or I'm going to have a friend, and, with accountability. Sometimes we need that accountability for us. So, have a friend that would go walk with you. It's getting nice out, right? So you can get outside. You don't necessarily have to go to a gym or have to go somewhere. You can use the things around you, so that you might have 15 minutes here or there, and you can do certain things in that time period.
Thank you for that. We're going to bring Beer back in and take some of these questions, because there are quite a few, and one referring to long COVID and getting started. And so I want to make sure that we cover these. Beer, we are going to bring you back in now. And I have to, I won't apologize, because he purposely often trolls. But we do have a serious question from actually our digital designer that just comes in sometimes and just kind of messes with me purposely. But he does, Doc, can I do something about my diet to fit my ring? Some mornings, neither of my pieces won't slide off my knuckle. And then as I went down a little bit more, they were saying, hey, he has a valid question. And so he's asking about the salt and sugar intake and how, and I'll put him out there. Props is a, not, what's the word? Not, oh God, I'm going to get in trouble. Props is on the lighter side of weight. He'd be about $125 if he was wet. And so that also when I talked earlier that maybe heavier doesn't indicate unhealthy, not being of a heavier weight may not all automatically be necessary, a good indicator that you're quote unquote healthy. And so this is a serious question that he posed. Can I ask Beer? Can I ask you to answer, or Dr. Labre, you can as well, in reference to salt intake and how that is messing? And again, it was posed a little interestingly so, but a couple of the folks in the comments was like, ask this question. So we're asking it.
Yeah, from a nutrition standpoint, I don't think there's anything like from a food standpoint that'll affect that, but from a sodium standpoint, that question could be the possibility of reducing your salt intake or your sodium intake, and see whether, the fluid retention starts to decrease a little bit. So not just salt, but think about processed packaged foods. There's a lot of food that has quite a bit of sodium. Noodles, canned foods, breads have a lot of hidden sodium, frozen foods, some frozen, not all, of course, but some frozen foods, canned foods, packaged foods, the amount of sodium added on your food. If you're doing takeout, we have no idea how much they're adding in your food, soy sauce, etc. So maybe watch your sodium intake a bit and see whether there's any association between reducing it and improvements in the way your rings are fitting. And then from a medical standpoint, I'm going to defer Dr. Alabre and see, there might be other thoughts that he wants to investigate further.
Yeah, I mean, technically, we don't see a lot of fluctuation in weights and sizes from sort of muscle and other things. It's typically fluid weight. And I think that's what Abir was referring to. If someone really is noticing wide fluctuation from night to morning, it's probably fluid. And we do know sodium is one of the ways we hold on to water, because your body wants to regulate the concentration of sodium. So it's going to bring in water to dilute that sodium load that you had the night before. And so you hold on to it. So you can see a size difference in that. There are some medications that can also do that, steroids being one of them, and some other things that can do it. And so when we're talking about healthy eating, we really want to think more the long term a little bit. That those quick fluctuations may be an indication there is some problems with you medically. So it's probably a good time to check with your doctor and see what's going on. If all of a sudden your ring doesn't fit and then it fits and whatnot. So the quick would be sodium's likely the first thing, but probably something to think about talking to someone more specifically about, and making sure there isn't something beyond that.
One last question, and Alyssa and Shana, I know that you probably delve a little bit into the sleep and physiology and exercise, so feel free to chime in here. He's asking another question. Could it be sleeping too? And then we have a couple of questions about long COVID. So I'll go to Dr. Alabre, and then Alyssa or Shana, if you want to jump in on this part as well, in this fluctuation. I know this young man, and so I'm listening to you all, and I'm like, I'm a little bit familiar with some of his dietary choices. And so just Yes, but he's not the only one, and so this information is important to get out there.
Right. And so I don't know that this, when we talk about sleep, sort of the brain changes and things like that, I don't know of a direct correlation between that and getting your fingers to be bigger and retaining water. However, if we think about sleep in general, there are ways where while you sleep, you can affect your circulation. So if you're sleeping, say, on your shoulder or your arm is twisted, you could actually reduce how blood flows around the arm because your blood is in a closed circuit. So it's going out, coming back, going out, coming back. And so if you put sort of like a dam on the river, it's going to rise sort of upstreams. And so if you somehow get yourself in a very awkward position while you sleep and your circulation in your arm is not adequate, you could end up with more water filling into the fingers down the arm and get swelling that way as well. Same way, if you go to the doctors, we put a tourniquet on your arm to actually draw your blood so you can see fill ups. And so these do happen. Or if you even sleep with compression tops or something that's really pushing onto your veins and preventing you from being able to get your blood around, that could also lead to swelling in the arm. So that's one way I can see a correlation, but not the sleep as I think of sleep per se.
Okay. Any additional there, Alyssa or Shayna? No pressure. Just I know that there's some correlation between exercise and sleeping. I've heard that getting proper exercise can actually, exercising during the day, if you're having a problem sleeping, can actually, and I see the heads going, so I'm on to something here. It can actually induce deeper and better sleeping in the evening. Is that correct?
Yes.
If that's your schedule.
Yes. I don't know if there's any correlation between the exercise and the hand swelling, but I think kind of what Abir kind of highlighted in the nutrition aspect is my knowledge to kind of like the sodium and kind of that fluid retention.
So, and we so
in terms of also sort of being flexible and people are a little bit different, we understand there are people who have a harder time sleeping if they exercise right before bedtime. So you kind of need to know yourself. If you're the kind of person who gets really activated, stimulated, and you're unable to shut down and fall asleep afterwards, that's something you may want to adjust and give yourself a little bit more time between the time you exercise and the time you go to bed. But having a good exercise sort of plan and regularity does impact your sleep and in a good way, sort of help you sleep. I wanted to.
Thank you all three for both of that. We're going to go into this. It's from Paula Kelly. Good rising all. My question for these guests is, what advice do they have about carefully getting active while dealing with long COVID? Because personally, it's been frustrating. It's been a frustrating long road getting back to my former level of activity. Not sure if anyone has had the similar post-COVID long COVID experience. And so I'll go to Alyssa and Shayna first. You two decide who's going to answer there. And then Abir, as we get ready to wrap up in a few minutes, I'll ask you if you're aware, kind of on the spot question, if you're aware of how the pandemic has maybe made us look at the impact of diet on our bodies. Are there certain foods that will help us maybe or not? So I'll go to Alyssa and Shayna first around the exercise long COVID piece. And then with that pop-up question, give you a couple of seconds to to just get your thoughts together around that, because that is real for a lot of people, long COVID. And then we may have learned that there can generally diet can contribute to health, but have we learned anything new in the pandemic? So Alyssa and Shayna.
Yeah, so we've actually had a lot of patients come through our lab with symptoms following their COVID diagnosis, obviously after they're, feeling better. And they come in with this shortness of breath, this respiratory symptoms. And we've actually done some research surrounding it. And it just essentially what we've found right now is that these people are, held up in their houses quarantining for weeks, and they might not be feeling well. So they're really not doing any activity. So they're kind of losing all that exercise capacity over the time that they had this viral illness. So I think kind of going back to my original recommendation of just starting out slow, we found that most of these people can't go back to their normal exercise regimen. So I think just kind of almost like acting like you're starting out from baseline, and just starting off.
What's baseline mean? I know what that means, but
yeah, so like baseline of like you don't do any exercise. So you're not gonna be able to do what you did maybe before. So just starting out at going for that 10-minute walk, or going on a bike ride for 10 minutes. I think it's a lot of, unfortunately, people having to start off from the beginning again, and obviously talking to your doctor about just making sure you're cleared for the exercise after having your illness. But
anything to add there, Shayna?
Yeah, and we've been seeing this a lot over the past year and the past couple of months. People coming in, as Alyssa said, and you know what? We understand it's frustrating not to be able to do what you used to be able to do. We understand, and unfortunately, with how exercise works, you lose your exercise capacity or what you can do very quickly, and it takes a lot longer to build it back up. So you're just going to have to kind of take those steps, what you can tolerate, for now, and just keep trying to build upon it until you feel like you're back to where you used to be. But it's going to take some time. It's not going to be, 2 weeks and you're back to what you're doing or what you used to be doing. It's going to take a longer period of time.
Thank you both for that. And I just wanted to mention, Paula, that, and maybe we'll come back to Alyssa and Shayna, because you touched on it a little bit. We got like 5 minutes left. Come back to how exercise contributes to mental well-being. So I'll give you two a couple of seconds to think about that and go to Abir to say, has there been any research? Has there been anything that you're aware of that lends to how diet, and let's go to some cultures. Unfortunately, early on, there was all of these theories that, first of all, people of color couldn't get it, and that the sea moss was going to protect them, and then eating, just healthy and a vegan. And that unfortunately contributed to a lot of, but since the pandemic happened, there's been a lot of research going on. Have you seen anything around diet helping with long COVID?
So I'm not quite certain about specific research helping with long-term COVID, but I think the blanket is really, trying your best to adhere to a healthy lifestyle in general, where the focus is on vegetables and some fruit and lean proteins and grains and starches. And really what the pandemic taught us is that what's really important is planning ahead, right? And what the pandemic has taught us is that food accessibility, food availability, food affordability changes, quickly. And so trying to think about, what kind of foods do I enjoy eating? What kind of foods do I have access to? What kind of affordable foods will still nourish my body appropriately and, lead me to lead a healthy lifestyle? That's really critical. And the planning piece is important. And so I'd go back to that. It does take time to plan. It does take time to prepare meals. But if you can just sit with yourself for, an hour a week to think about some of these things. What do I have at home? What can I add to my pantry items in order to lead a healthy lifestyle? What kind of protein choices do I have? What can I substitute? That's really critical.
So it goes back to the original healthy lifestyle, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. Do your best. And I love how I hate that it's a fact, but I love that you acknowledge that, where we talked about there are food deserts, healthy food accessibility, the economy, all of that does play a role into, and exercise, Shayna and Alyssa, though it's real what you talked about time, for some that are working 2 and 3 jobs and it's just real. And so that'll take us down a whole different road. But Abir, thank you so much for that. So Alyssa and Shayna, and you all always do this to me at 9:55 with 10,000 questions. And so I'm going to try to hit them real quick. And so real quick, Shayna, and I'll say, let me just pick Alyssa, impact of exercise to help mental wellness.
Of course. Yeah. So, from my own experience, I think that having a normal exercise routine has helped my own, mental health. But I've heard a lot of patients that come through our lab say, especially with the pandemic, like, they were exercising regularly. They're going to the gym. They're like out in public, with other people, or they have a friend that they go and exercise with, and that all shut down during the pandemic. And they come through and they're off of that exercise routine and they're just frustrated, and they, you don't get that social interaction And of course, with the exercise, there's huge benefits of being on an exercise routine and just with your mental health. But I think the pandemic has definitely hindered that, and I think that's only heightened, people's stressors and depression rates.
Kind of off the cuff here, but again, these questions are coming in, and so I don't know who maybe Dr. Labre or Beer. Can you talk about hormones, weight gain in women? Since I've had my hysterectomy, Naraki, thank you for your transparency. It has been hard to keep weight off. Just by raising up your hand, who's going to touch that one, Dr. Labre or Dr. Labre?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to answer because we do know there are correlation between hormone levels and weight and lots of other aspects of your life. I mean, the body is one big interconnected sort of network. Everything can impact other aspects of your life, and it's difficult to speak to someone particularly without knowing more. And so what I would say is that yes, it can have an impact, but also probably the time to look into it further with a professional, someone who knows, and say, hey, I've noticed this weight thing since my hysterectomy. Is there something more to it that I need to look into? And you may find that what your answer is very different than someone else's answer. So I don't want to have one generalized answer to this, but there can be an impact.
Thank you for that, Dr. Labre. I'm still trolling some of the questions, and I use that word lightly. I just wanted to also just name a couple of things to Alyssa and Shayna, Pastor Marion saying thank you, very encouraging, and Dr. Abir as well. I'm just trying to make sure I covered all the questions. Nope, eat everything your body tells you after COVID. The body is intuitive. Then everything Dr. Beta just said while I was typing. So Belinda is saying that, if you get your appetite back, just do it with moderation, because the fact that you have an appetite for some is a good thing. But the thing that I'm gathering from here today is, and I learned, and I've been hearing this a lot, is that healthcare should be, or is, and should be customizable. And the way that you ensure that, because sometimes when you customize things change. And so you may have to go back and sort of change. And so Dr. Labre, I like how you said, when I thought that the only indicator of your system not doing well with it is to find out on the negative end. No, you said that there are glucose tests. There are cholesterol tests. Alyssa and Shayna, I'm sure you all deal with some level of maybe that's in the cath lab, a heart lab, but a stress monitors and stuff like that. And so I'm gathering customization. I'm gathering that the more proactive that we are in our healthcare, and can I just keep it 100? A lot of us are paying for health insurance and we fuss about the rates. Take advantage of it, Dr. Labre. Healthcare is important.
I know.
Get it where you can and when you can. And so we're leaving with the understanding of customization. Keep up with your routine and preventative health care. Diet and nutrition are important, with the understanding of all that plays into, we'll just sum it up. Some of the inequities in our world do have influence on our time, on the availability of healthy food options. And also sometimes, I'm not spilling anything on this new stuff here. And also it does contribute, Dr. Labre, a time factor too, to getting back to our doctor for routine and preventive health care. And so today was all of the sessions have been good, but today was one of the sessions without all the hype and things like that, in those moments where Dr. Labre says, because I think that this is one of the ones where people are, because diet and nutrition are the fundamental things. So I'm talking to myself here. Okay. We're going to get ready to go.
That was a great summary, Jimmy. I really
I'm trying. I'm learning from you, sir.
These are key factors. They are very important. It's the basics, and then there is the added that is somewhat customizable.
Okay. And I'd like to end by saying, make it fun. Make it fun, make it enjoyable. Do something you love. Focus on you. Self-care isn't just about getting your nails done or your hair done. It's about making sure you're doing well when it comes to your stress and sleep and food and physical activity. So make it fun. Focus on you. Take good care of yourself.
Abir, thank you so much. One last question, because I did not want to forget this. Sitting, I mentioned to Alyssa and Shayna, our demographic. Is there benefit to sitting and exercising if you have either limited mobility, or is there any benefit to sitting and exercising?
Absolutely. I have a lot of experience with this. I had a lot of patients who are wheelchair bound or just can't get up and walk, and things like that can be very effective. You can do simple things like leg lifts. You can use cans you have at home or water bottles and use them, lifting your arms and things like that can be very effective.
Okay. So. Thank you. Today, today was good, and as Auntie Java said, enjoyed my cup of Java today, and so I appreciate all of you. One thing I will say, and I'll let our guests go. We had intended to release a survey today. We want to ensure that what we're doing with Your Healthy Java is having an impact, and we see some demonstration of it here in the questions and the information we're getting. Due to some technical difficulties, we're going to post it on the website. Posted on the Java with Jimmy page, but we need you all to fill out the survey, give your feedback around the subjects, around the time, and we'll try to be a little flexible with that. But please, the survey is coming out so we can assess what we're doing. We are celebrating the fact that MGH is moving this beyond the pilot, and so we're going into a long-term support of making sure that you have your healthy Java. So with that being said, look out for the survey. And we will be back on April. I should have had the form here. We'll be back on the first Tuesday in April. And there are some subjects we are talking about around stress management and substance use and things like that. And so that's coming up in April. Alyssa, Shayna, Abir, and Dr. Labrie, of course, but you're part of the team. But no, and seriously, thank you all for this. And I just have to highlight the fact that Alyssa and Shayna are right there in the lab. So thank you for doing this, and it's very much appreciated. And Abir, thank you. And I'm sure third time's a charm, and so we'll have you back as well. Thank you all so much, and we will see you on the first Tuesday in April. I'm going to go and pay some bills and do some announcements. But thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, and bye-bye.
See you guys later. Listen, everyone, that was one of the most awesome sessions. We've had a few with Your Healthy Java, but that was one of the most realist and awesome sessions that we've had, and I appreciate our guests dedicating their time and giving us all that information. And so tag people that are trying to lose weight for healthy reasons. Tag people that that you just know you need to tag them, and we'll leave that right there. All right, folks, I'm going to get ready to wrap up. I just wanted to mention, don't forget, and I did have a flyer ready. Let me see if I can bring it up real quick. Please don't forget that next Saturday we are gathering at the Underground Cafe at 3 p.m. Next Thursday is the Java with Jimmy anniversary, and so we'll mention more about that. But don't forget the survey. The survey will be coming out as soon as I can get all these websites hooked back up, and so I can process it right, because none of my regular stuff is available to me on this new thing, and it's kind of frustrating. All right, have a wonderful day, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Darren Howell is coming on tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Everybody, we need to know Wednesdays. And then on Thursday, I have a makeup artist and her own skincare and beauty line. Keisha Holden is coming in, and we're going to talk about we talked about inner and outer beauty today, about exercising and diet and nutrition, but we're going to talk inner and outer beauty with Keisha Holden of K Cosmetics. All right. Thank you all so much. And we will see you again tomorrow at 9 a.m.